This show and many others like it are brought to you by our generous backers at patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. Go there, take a look at the rewards, maybe kick us a couple of bucks a month, and help us do all of the shows that we do. We like doing it, and people like hearing them, is what they tell us. We really appreciate everybody who has given so far, and everybody who is thinking about giving now. Once again, that is patreon.com/DuckFeedTV.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
My name's Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And this is Bonfireside Chat. It is an adjective favorite.
You picked it up that time.
Yeah. Chekhov's joke.
Yeah. And this week on the Appendix episode, we are reading your responses to Salt and Sanctuary. We got a lot of responses, and some of them were quite lengthy. So I'd like to apologize in advance if I left yours out or if I cut some things from that. That's entirely me trying to fit in a diversity of responses and kind of subject matter for it. Please do not let that discourage you from writing in and sticking to kind of our usual kind of suggestion, which is to keep it concise and novel.
Yeah, you didn't do anything wrong, but just know that we will kind of edit these down.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and get us started here with Will by contact. A couple of points from listening to the first episode. The Sphere Grid. You talk about how you can get an upgrade for a weapon that you can't make use of for a few hours, and then complained about how it takes too many points to get an upgrade on the other side of the tree. Since you don't need that level 3 sword upgrade immediately, spend some of those points to get to the crossbow. It's not that limiting, and you aren't punished for spreading out unless you really want to rush to get sword level 5, which obviously you don't need for a long time. Also, some of the level 5 weapons and armor are worse than the level 4 or level 3 weapons, so it's not a huge deal to reach that level. Shortcuts. I believe they're built in because of the Betrayer Creed, since you have to defile sanctuaries, which turns it hostile and aggroes the NPCs, and you lose the ability to teleport unless you install a Betrayer Shrine in their place. If you haven't planned out your defiling path, you can easily cut off fast travel to areas you've previously been to, and these weird shortcuts let you make your way back way quicker than otherwise. Thanks, though, for the dedication and hard work. I do love the podcast. Just wanted to provide some counterpoints. Always appreciate that, especially if we're like, why would people do this? I'm always interested in hearing arguments for it.
Yeah.
I think that like I still don't, I still don't agree with you, but that's fine. We don't have to agree. To the second point, that could be why they did it, but that's a real niche case.
Yeah.
Like they hid that Betrayer Creed pretty well, and to kind of structure so much of your game around this very, very niche mechanic, I think is pretty weird.
Yeah.
The first point, like you're right, but there's nothing in the game that signals that.
Yeah, it's imperfect information. And with anything, like this is a problem with any kind of spec tree that happens to be very difficult to do any kind of respecking on. Like you're going to make a choice that will, lock you out of something else. That is what a choice is. Here, it just feels, it feels more diffuse.
So I think with the benefit of hindsight, Will is right.
Yes.
Right. So like, I now know going through and I could say like, okay, like I don't need to rush for that high level sword because I know I'm not going to get it for hours.
Right.
You don't know that the first time you're playing the game though. You certainly don't know like, hey, this level 3 sword will be better than this level 5 sword. Like that's really counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So like in retrospect, yes, that is one way to do it. But the game, I think, signals that very poorly. And like Cole said, your respec options are very limited. Like you get, your 5 gray pearls or black pearls or gray pearls, right? Do the undo.
Yeah.
You get your 5 or 6 of those things, but they're not an unlimited resource and it's not a full respec.
Yeah.
So I think one of those things is a case of bad signaling. Like there's an advanced tactic. I guess they're both. They're advanced tactics that make use of this vestigial feature that feels like, or a feature that feels vestigial if you're not engaging in these kind of optional systems or you don't have this kind of advanced knowledge.
Yeah.
So those are good arguments for it. It's just the game should have told me that rather than you.
Yeah.
So again, just my perspective though, like, I did not think to diversify my sphere grid. It's the same problem I have with
12
Final Fantasy 12. Yeah.
Yep.
Like it's like the same, like where it's like, why wouldn't I want to work towards this cool thing? That makes sense to me. Like I'm gonna run in place for a couple times until I find a town that sells me this armor.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me this thing. Like why would I do that?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't feel very good.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about it. I don't know if there is an elegant solution. I think that, one way to do it is just to like make certain parts of it unlock when you reach certain points of the game too. But I think that's also what they wanted to avoid by getting rid of like stat requirements, stuff like that. I don't know.
What is the other thing I would say is, what is the advantage to presenting your skill tree or your skill as a tree?
Yeah.
Your skill system like this, like, I mean, the thing that they do with it is they add lore to it. But if it was just like every time you level up you get a lore note, would have accomplished the same thing essentially. It's just, I don't think you get a lot from having it visually represented like this.
Yeah.
As opposed to like Final Fantasy X, where like those separations of space are much kind of freer, and you're going to I guess you still do that in this one. You still bypass things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't think you gain a lot from this one, and you do potentially lose.
Yeah.
From it. So
I don't know. Those are both both of those points make sense. I also disagree, but we don't have to. We don't have to agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm glad that there is a use case for it.
Yes.
Even if it is one that like I said, I wish the game had told me that rather than.
Yeah. On a second playthrough, like if I rolled up a new character, I would totally make better decisions.
That's true
about that stuff.
Like 100%.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely approaching it as somebody who's not going to go 100% deep on it.
Yeah.
I can't really what is it? I'm thinking of Invisible Ink. Something I've done for Comrade recently. Like I had the same kind of thing where I'm like, this is a mechanic that makes a lot of sense if you're going to go. Neo does this too.
Yeah.
Where like if you're going to go 100% all in, this mechanic makes sense, and it actually is detrimental if you're like, I'm going to play through this game once and leave it alone.
Yeah.
And I am always going to prefer, as somebody with valuable time, not saying that anybody who goes deep on it doesn't have valuable time, as somebody whose game playing time is limited and like appreciates playing a game and being done with it rather than like 100%ing super platinuming it.
Yeah.
I like a game that allows for both. This is a game that like, hey, if this works if you want to play through it in 16 hours and be done with it. It also works if you want to go super deep and put 60 hours into it.
Yeah.
And both work equally well.
Yeah.
That's something I value a lot.
Yeah. I don't like catching all of the downsides of a system just because I'm approaching it understandably the first time with very little knowledge of the way that it articulates. What I would prefer is that even if you just did like a completely RNG entropic choice, you still had a viable play. You still had a viable build, at least like minimum mainline, etc. It is just your specializations that make it easier to play the way that you want to play. What it feels like, when we talked in the last episode about the way that bosses seem to be universally resistant to blunt damage, from hitting that chronic. Sorry. Yes.
No, it's
fine.
Right.
It's fine. Yeah, there we go. Can't all be winners.
Right.
No,
that's okay. Cole's a chief lord now.
Yeah. No. Chief lord.
He's King Spliffington the Dank.
Kings. Yeah.
And he's back, baby.
The way that all the bosses seem to be universally resistant to blunt damage punishes you for having invested points into that when you can probably use it against a lot of enemies. But this is a game, because it is in a Dark Souls mold, that is very much about boss fights in a lot of ways. Like that is a tentpole of this. And so by just making a choice about what happens to work for you, it is putting you down a path that is not particularly fertile,
Yeah. That's how I felt about it, at least.
Yeah. Christopher writes via contact, "Fuck the Witch of the Lake." And that is all.
Thank you for including that.
I did it for you, man.
Thank you. What Sonic Zone shall I Google? Your pick, buddy. You're the birthday boy.
So I'll do the next one because that was very brief. Jeremy writes via contact, "I haven't beaten Salt and Sanctuary, but I have two characters who are probably at the 2/3 point. Even though I'm kind of anticipating that you guys are going to be a bit down on it, I think that Salt and Sanctuary is a pretty solid game. I was really pleased when I picked it up to find that it was so polished and atmospheric. I really dig how the campy B-movie gore contrasts with the moody, foggy island. And there's something about the electric guitar soundtrack that really does it for me. The coolest bit for me was to see Ska Studios make something so confident and high quality. In high school, I played the shareware version of their schlocky punk rock themed River City Rampage clone, Zombie Smashers X, to death. And it's just great to see a designer from way before the Steam, PSN, XBLA indie game boom grow up a bit, do a take on Dark Souls, and really pull it off.
Yeah, I agree with good on them.
Yeah. No, they made good. Like they have definitely put something out there that a lot of people really seem to like, and we can never take that away from them with our quibbles, you know.
And wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like I if you've listened to the episode at this point, Jeremy, like I don't agree with those points, but I also agree with the point that like I'm glad these guys exist, and they seem like, you know, they obviously have talent.
Right.
Yeah. These are people to watch.
Yeah.
You know?
And that other stuff from the first paragraph there about the gore and the electric guitar, that comes down to taste. You know,
that's
we can make arguments about how it does or doesn't fit in with like something approaching Souls aesthetic, but like there's no reason that a Souls game couldn't have electric guitar. It is just me not liking the way that this manifests, and
maybe that works for you. It's one of the things if we end up doing Hollow Knight, because Hollow Knight, I've seen a bunch of screen grabs from it, and I think it is much more comedy focused. I think there are more jokes in it. Like, it's possible that I've just seen the 2 screens that are explicitly jokes and the rest of it's dead serious, but I think it has a bunch of jokes in it.
Yeah.
And that's something that, like, Souls is funny.
Yep.
You know, there are funny jokes in Souls, but it's pretty rare.
Right.
And this seems to be a little bit more up on kind of Front Street. So that'll be an interesting tone thing to kind of explore, I think.
Yeah.
You know? Stuart says, by contact. When I was a teen, I worked with a youth theater where we took acting and performance very seriously. We always said we never wanted an audience to leave thinking, well, that was good for a bunch of kids. Playing Salt and Sanctuary brings me back to that feeling. Seeing really talented hands tackle an imposing project is heartening, especially since I don't feel the same kind of commitment and effort from a much bigger, higher budgeted game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Similar point to before.
Yeah, similar point to before. Like it doesn't feel like you don't have to grade it on a curve for it to be good.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't think that we ever did that either. Like, I think we talked about it being good that it was 2 people, and that's really cool. But as I mentioned in that like final one, it's not a question of like lack of polish. It's a question of where they put their considerable resources. Yeah. They're not choices I would have made, you know, but it doesn't mean though that there wasn't like a lot of care and stuff put into it.
Right.
You know, this could have been a big budget, you know, game.
Yeah. No.
I mean, other than the soundtrack, which I think is pretty indefensible, but other than the soundtrack choice, as far as a budgetary limitation, like, you know, it could have been like, when I say a big budget game, I mean like one of those, the big studios that have those like kind of indie side things. Yeah. Yeah. You know, like side piece. Yeah.
Little bit of exploit action on the side.
Yeah. Yeah. We just got to get in a little bit with kids. Yeah. That kind
of thing. Rick writes via contact. My experience with Salt and Sanctuary closely resemble my initial experience with Dark Souls 2, which is fitting since this plays like a love letter to that. It took me a good 4 or 5 hours to even be sure that I was having fun. The different button mapping made it so that everything felt kind of clumsy and all of my instincts were wrong. In the case of Dark Souls 2, it was the different parrying timing and floaty movement, and my dumbass decision to roll deprived on my first playthrough. Ooh. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it as a 2D Dark Souls and more like a Castlevania with the Dark Souls 2 paint job, and the game really grew on me. My biggest qualm is that unlike the Souls games, in which the punishing difficulty is balanced by the deaths being almost always fair, I'm looking at you, Frigid Outskirts and Double Sullivan's Beast. I think
that's supposed to emphasize the almost.
Yes, almost.
I don't think he's saying like the Frigid Outskirts are hella fucking fair. Yep. Like Dark Souls 2 Dark Souls is unfair, except for the Frigid Outskirts and the Double Sullivan's Beast. That's
yeah, I didn't emphasize that correctly. Yeah, it's okay. Dying in Salt and Sanctuary doesn't always feel that way. Again, fair and like it teaches you a lesson, and often seems considerably less instructional. even though on the whole it is an easier game. That being said, I've still been enjoying playing through again, though I'm going shieldless this time, and I fully expect to rage quit at that fucking motherfucking Witch of the Lake.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
I also, those things that we were talking about, that getting hit on the ground, falling in the pits, and the Tree of Man, those are all under the blanket umbrella of like bullshit that didn't feel like our fault.
Right.
And the point you make about it not being like learning experiences is huge, because when enemies have this kind of like array of one-hit death attacks, like that discourages learning.
Right.
You get to see less of the boss fight before you have to start over, watch a fairly lengthy loading screen in the case of Salt, and then do your boss run up again.
Yeah.
That's frustrating.
Yeah.
Like it takes things that maybe would not be that big of a deal if you got more observance time to learn their patterns. If you're doing 2 steps forward, 1.9 steps back, every time you're only seeing like little minuscule bits.
Yeah.
So
Rick's point about getting used to Salt's control scheme is actually really valid. I think we talked about that in episode 1. It was so long ago. But just, the difference in mapping, not so much for the attacks, but just not having dodge map to circle. I know on the PS4, you're able to change that around. However, that is something that is done at the hardware or firmware level. As an accessibility thing, it is not something that is done in the game, and so it'd be kind of like switching the keycaps around on your keyboard. It's the only reason I haven't done that. I know it's an option. It just was not smooth enough for that to be tempting to me.
And it ends up being really significant. Like you accidentally heal when you're trying to dodge.
Yeah.
All the time. Like the buttons that are swapped from a Souls control scheme.
Yeah.
It almost seems like it's the developer trying to signal that like, hey, this isn't Souls, this is Castlevania, but there's so much of it. It's like so Souls.
Yeah.
So, I had the same thing. It took me a while to figure it out.
Yeah.
Michael says via contact, let me start off by saying that I am a Salt and Sanctuary apologist. I think that under some misguided design decisions and unearned Dark Souls affections lies a very robust Soulsvania with some near perfect systems. The most laudable tweaks to the formula are the leveling/build systems. It easily has more build variety, more build validity, better balance, and more ease of use considerations than any From game has ever managed. That seems hyperbolic, but after experiencing the funneling of Souls games into 3 to 4 valid builds as one approaches the meta, 1 to 2 in Bloodborne's case, and then playing Salt and Sanctuary, it boggles the mind. Why could From never solve poise? Why would they always end up shipping with a dump stat or two and with dozens of imbalanced equipables? Why are patches, or more saliently, new entries, always 1 step forward, 2 steps back, with the exception of Scholar of the First Sin? While it always seemed these were numeric, easily fixable problems, I shrugged and surmised that there must be complexities that I'm missing, and that one doth protest too much. Until Salt and Sanctuary, that is. That a much smaller studio could pull it off suggests that there never was a question of resources. It's doubtful that SCA has more robust testing and QA departments than From. That said, it's all for naught in a game in which multiplayer is almost entirely a non-starter, and which simply isn't interesting or engaging enough in terms of story, level design, or encounter design to warrant more than a couple runs. It's very unlikely that From will poach the system designer from SCA for their future IP, and that is a shame. In conclusion, fuck the disemboweled husk. Also, great scissors. I think that's ending with fucking a boss section.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm glad that Michael wrote in, because he's obviously coming from a multiplayer perspective.
Yes.
That second paragraph, I was ready to disagree with the power of 1,000 suns until I got to the part where he says Souls funnels you into valid builds as you approach the meta, which makes me think he's talking about in a PvP sense, which could very well be true.
Right.
I just and that's always been like, it's not a weakness, but like, let's say you were drawing up a bonfire side chat from the ground up. Mm-hmm. There's probably a version of this that has a third chair that like is super invested in the PvP.
Yeah.
That would make a more balanced show. And it's too late now. But like, we brought in people. Right. But there's probably a version of the show in which like Jeremy Greer is there all the time to talk about PvP and consideration.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's true in Souls.
Right.
Like I think that Dark Souls 2 has the most robust like build variety and validity of like any of these games.
Yeah.
That have Souls or Souls in the title. I played through that game a lot of different ways, and they're all really fun and good.
Yeah.
But I would probably get totally stomped PvP, in a PvP sense. And like, there probably are weapons that just break PvP. I just don't play PvP.
Right. Yeah. It's just a world that I don't know anything about, and I can't even pretend to speak the language. For me, it's kind of, it seems apples and oranges to compare the builds, the funneling in builds as you approach the meta to a game that necessarily cannot have a meta. Because there's no multiplayer, so you have to look at what is most functional. It's not operating with the same number of constrictions, right, or the same number of restrictions as people find these semi-degenerate strategies to try and get a one-up over each other in kind of the ambient PvP that happens.
And I wonder if I'm misreading your comment, Michael. Let me know if so, I did disagree, which again is fine, because I don't feel like, if you find that Dark Souls 2, for example, or Dark Souls 1, like funnels you into a couple different playstyles, and Salt has more than that, like I definitely didn't see that with Salt.
Right.
So like maybe there's something I'm missing, because on your second point, which I mostly agree, like it's not the kind of game that, even if I liked my first playthrough more than I did, it wasn't going to be the kind of thing I'm going to play over and over again. Like I have all of the Souls games, like even Dark Souls 3, which is my least favorite Souls game, I played through, several times more than I played through Salt.
Right.
And is more appealing to me, but I think that he is talking about the PvP because he talks about the patches.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and as far as and to the larger point, and Michael didn't bring this up, if there were systems that in Salt that I would want to see kind of copied in other games, like I really do like the town building aspect of the shrines.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Like having I get to choose which shopkeepers and such are here based on the build that I want to pursue and what I want this sanctuary to look like.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'd be more powerful without teleporting.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is near this farming spot, or this is near this spot I'm going to revisit. Like I want it to have these resources. But I think that's a really cool system.
Yeah.
And could see that working in another game.
Yeah. All I can think about is mapping that onto like Majula,
Yeah.
Yeah. Hunter says via contact, did anybody else find the lore to be almost completely impenetrable for the complete opposite reason of most Souls-likes? There's so much of it. Every single node of the skill tree has a different verse from the game Bible. And I'm the kind of person whose eyes unfocus when I see a long list, so I haven't read it all. It feels like front-loading things in a way that Souls games don't do, instead of drip-feeding lore bits through the items that you pick up. Anyone else feel like it discouraged lore digging instead of encouraging it like it was probably supposed to?
I think that they're like adding it to your level ups.
Yep.
Thing, it does make it that's more than you really need, and taking it away from most weapons too.
Yeah.
When you pick up weapons, they sometimes have stuff about the world, but for the most part they don't.
Right.
They just kind of talk about the weapon.
It's pretty much just the boss weapons that have it.
Yeah, the boss weapons are the exception, but like a regular thing you're just going to find on the land doesn't usually have significant lore
right
attached to it. That's kind of a good point. Like it is a weird extra little thing to read.
Yeah. There's so much of it. It is a preponderance, and again, it is noun soup that the conceit of the game just doesn't bear out for me because those nouns are not given significance in the way that I would like. You could 20 hours into Dark Souls 1 say, who the fuck are these people and why do they matter? But you find out pretty quick.
Yeah.
This is something that I think is very important about Dark Souls, and seeing these different iterations has borne this out for me. And even when they added it to Bloodborne, it made a big difference. Having the item description show up in load times is a huge deal.
I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like just in terms of building up mystery, in terms of seeing, probably the same handful of things over and over again. Like as you look at it, it gives you something to do while load times are there. Load times obviously are variable. They're not going, they're not dependable. But it is not relying on you kind of getting the story in this kind of linear way that they dole it out. It's also not, requiring you to get everything to get that piece. You could see something that you never would have encountered, but you still get that piece of story. I think that is incredibly valuable if you're going to go the route of telling story by descriptions.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. That's something we talk a lot about. It comes up on Watch Out for Fireballs too. Like, how do you what's the most efficient kind of best way to provide that kind of stuff to the player.
Yeah.
And I'm still like way into audio logs that happen during quiet exploration points.
Yeah.
But the Souls way of like looking at everything when you find it does hit kind of a good rhythm. Yeah. Because Souls is full of quiet time.
Yep.
Like there's tons of points where it's like I'm in this faraway corner. Enemies don't patrol in Souls for the most part. They stand there and wait for you.
You're looting after you've killed everybody mostly. Like there are times where that comes to bite you, but
for the most part you're safe.
Yeah.
If you're not engaged in a fight, you're safe. Salt doesn't really do that. Things kind of move around a little bit more. Like they activate at a certain proximity, but they don't. A lot of times things will kind of like walk back and forth, so you can't be on the same screen as something and be safe.
Right. Whereas
like in Souls, like you could be up on a roof or something and like you'll be fine. They won't float up to you, things like that. So there's kind of more space to read those things, and the way this all does, it does kind of like double up the opportunities for reading those things by attaching those lore notes. I know in an earlier response I said like you could just, if you wanted to disseminate that information, you could just make it happen on level up.
Yep.
But what if it just like appeared on the screen while it's loading or whatever?
Yeah.
Or appeared when you leveled up. It was just a paragraph.
Yep.
That was you kind of learning this island as you got more powerful or something.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of information overload.
Yep. While you're teleporting, while you're loading, and it's requiring you to seek it out as opposed to presenting it to you in kind of passive times.
Yeah. Because I never need to see that priest dragging you back to the thing ever again. Like it's it's like kind of cool the first time you see it. Like it's kind of brutal and atmospheric and cool, but like, man, do you watch it enough times? Ben says via contact, I wanted to highlight the couch co-op for Salt and Sanctuary. I'm glad you wrote in, Ben, because I didn't get any experience with that. I played this game from start to finish with my wife. The summoning mechanic using the stone guides, I think, stone sellsword, was hard to get used to at first, but once we did, we were hooked. We played a lot of couch co-op over the years, starting with Champions of Norath on PS2 and playing titles as diverse as the Lego games and Borderlands 2. When we got to the end, she told me that was her favorite game. It was her favorite game that we had played together. This surprised me as it had been very frustrating at times. In particular, some bosses, like the Tree of Men, really didn't lend themselves well to having two players on the screen. In that particular instance, we beat it by having one player die and the other one go it alone. Despite this, I think it was the feeling of exploration and discovery that we experienced together that made the game so enjoyable. Also, when everything comes together on the 20th attempt at a boss, or you get the rhythm down and victory is achieved, you get to share that feeling with somebody you love. Few video game experiences can match that. Sure, the game had its flaws, but it will remain one of my favorite game experiences of all time just because of who I played it with and the obsession we developed over it together. And as an added bonus, it convinced her to finally give Dark Souls a try. She is only up to the Taurus Demon, but so far she is enjoying it. Probably not as much as I am enjoying watching her. Another very sweet message.
Yeah. We don't give out awards on this show. This is one of my favorite responses we've gotten because I can't know for sure, but what Ben has written about seems to be a very rare experience of this game. Sharing it with somebody and especially using this co-op feature, which, by all evidence is kind of an afterthought, right? You just got probably a different thing out of this by sharing it with somebody. I'm very happy to have somebody in the audience who wrote in about it. So thank you.
Yeah, that's very nice. That's very sweethearted, and that can totally change things. Like even down to like Derek Hayes is not my wife, my friend Derek, but like there are games that even games that I know I'm not like, I think Salt and Sanctuary is mediocre. I'm not projecting this onto Ben, but even games that are kind of mediocre that we have played like are super special and fun because of that experience. Having it together is just is very good. Like I talked about this. I can't remember if I talked about it in air, but we're like probably halfway through Dying Light. And the hilarious thing about that is if you play it co-op, you just play 2 copies of the main character. And you can play up to 4 people. So you can just have 4 of this identical dude bro, like running around doing shit, like grappling, hooking around the city. And just like, the cutscenes happen and they're just talking to the series of cranes. And like, I was texting with him and I was just like, I had to cancel on him or something. And I was like, okay, well, next time we play this, my crane will be your crane slave. And then like, he was like, there's like commander crane and soldier crane. And like, it's very funny. And the game is like, it's pretty good, but there's a lot of things that are mediocre about it.
Right.
The super fun thing is just like, it'll always be fun because I had fun with my buddy.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yep. Yeah. Couch co-op is totally a thing. Like it's why Earth Defense Force exists.
Oh, 100%. You're playing that game single player. It is a sad day. Something's gone wrong. It's like you're eating pie filling at the same time. Like There's like an earthquake that happened in your city if you're playing Earth Defense Force Clone.
Yeah. Sorry. You got me with that. Chris writes via contact. Visuals aside, Salt and Sanctuary makes a great first impression. However, as a player driven by a love of systems rather than mechanics, I came to hate this game over time. Salt's skill tree seems like a great way to customize playstyle, but ultimately serves to railroad you until you get far enough into the game that skill points become meaningless. The game seeks to simplify gear requirements via nodes that unlock gear classes, but they must be taken sequentially. This is a kick in the pants when rank 5 gives you a plus 10 to a stat, and the soft cap is 50. Playing with a two-hand strength weapon, your effective stat cap goes down to 34. The gear nodes arbitrarily restrict your build options. My normal build of light armor and huge weapons takes an obscene number of points, and it hurts build diversity and replayability very badly. This system cripples itself when it later lets you reclaim points to spend elsewhere, the furthest nodes being strictly better. Universally, the level up system leaves me without enough points to spend to acquire cool new verbs, of which there are precious few, but too many stats to make gaining a level meaningful. I could look past its failings as an RPG if the action held up its end. For me, Souls combat isn't just its measured pace, but the complex multi-equation systems created by weapons and their interactions. There are so many factors to each weapon in Souls. There's damage, poise, swing speed, reach, and my personal favorite, animation patterns, and their impact on reach at each point of your combo. Add the different values for each enemy, and each encounter becomes a puzzle to be solved. By sacrificing a dimension, it gives up a literal and metaphorical depth, the important factors being weapon speed and reach, which homogenizes weapons and further harms build diversity. Ultimately, the game fails as both an action game and as an RPG, leaving only its lore to recommend it, but I recommend just reading the wiki. Despite finishing the game, I absolutely hated Salt and Sanctuary, and myself for playing it. My time with Salt stands as one of the few times that I can look back on and say, I wasted some precious grains of my life's hourglass on a thing that offered me literally no pleasure. At least that time broke me of the desire to beat every game that I play, no matter how little fun I'm having. If only Salt had come out before Final Fantasy 13 too. Shout out to Serg for their help in writing this screed.
Serg, I think, wrote in for next. That's pretty. The ending is, I think it was a sad ending.
It's pretty dark. Yeah,
it's like the mist of responses. I also am bummed out by it, by much of the same things you are. Like I'm still, I don't think I derive little pleasure from it, but like most of the points you're saying, I think are pretty right on.
There are lots of points where I would have stopped if I wasn't doing it for this, but doing it for this helped it feel worthwhile.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing too, is there's always this other factor of like, at least we'll get to talk about it.
Yeah.
But 2017 Gary stops games when he's not having fun too. So welcome to, I appreciate 2017 Chris, being upgrading from regular Chris who doesn't stop games when they're no longer fun. So unless it's for Watch Out for Fireballs, I stop games when they're not fun.
Right. And sometimes for that.
And it's like, I'm not going to beat myself up over that. Like, recent events, life is short.
Yep.
You have to value and do things that make you happy. So, The one thing I would say in response to that too is that like the game kind of does the charm system with the weapons where you can like change things like length and attack speed. I think is actually pretty neat.
Yeah.
And does help diversify that equipment. The issue is though, that's something that's a tag that you can kind of put on a wide variety of equipment. So it still has that homogenizing effect.
Yeah.
Like it's not like big hammers are that different from each other. It's just any big hammer with a swing speed upgrade or without one.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah. You're just not going to get like the variation that you get. Like in this engine, a rapier and a short sword would probably animate the same, but they couldn't be much more different in Dark Souls itself, Yeah.
Because again, they miss that dimension.
Yeah.
And there is a big thing like with because that things are coming at you. So in Dark Souls, where you have kind of the functional equivalent is like a poke or a swing, like a left or right swing, you can sometimes kind of dead angle things or hit them from the side with a swing, but you can always turn to orient to poke.
Yeah.
The equivalent to that in Salt and Sanctuary is an overhead swing versus a poke.
Right.
And enemies are constantly coming at you from above. Like you require having an overhead swing.
Yeah, there are whole classes of weapons, particularly spears, that are not viable because
they're just kind of garbage. And you can, unlike in Dark Souls, like if I have a spear, like it's kind of like maybe for crowd control, it can be useful to have something that's a swing, but you don't have to. There's ways to mitigate that.
Yeah.
There's ways to get around that.
Yeah.
So
and it's relatively easy to figure out how to deploy that, using the two hand or using strong attacks or, weak attacks on down the line.
Yeah. It's intuitive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What does Fletch say?
Oh yeah, this is me. I thought it was you. Fletcher says, and I think this is Sirg.
Yes,
from the Slack message board. If you have not joined us there, you should. It's a fun time.
Yeah.
Fletch says, I own over 5,000 games on Steam.
Well,
every single time it goes on sale, I get an alert saying Salt and Sanctuary is cheaper and cheaper, yet somehow I never manage to pull the trigger. I think that's the Salt and Sanctuary experience in a nutshell. It's just there, but you can't care enough to either pick one, purchase it, or remove it from your wish list, or actually finish the game after whatever level you get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something. I don't know. Like this was seen as the great hope for Souls-like.
Right? It was the great Salt White Hope.
I mean, I didn't mean to be like cliche or whatever, but like, people invested a lot in this being as great as it was. And, a lot of people talked to us about it and said like, hey, this is something special. And I think despite all of this, I think it is. Like there is something to recommend it here, at least to explore and reflect on the main series, but like what can continue? What are the pieces that could be reconstituted? What is the mimicry? What is the what is there between Lords of the Fallen and this as kind of the two main Souls-likes that we've seen, and not just stuff that has kind of taken loops or taken small mechanics from Souls and gone off and done their own thing. Like what can actually recapture that? Is it possible?
Yeah, I don't know, because the thing the common thread in Souls-likes we've done that are not like Kingsfield 4, which doesn't kind of count, but is that the least Souls-like they are, the better.
Right.
They are. So like this, Neo, Dark Mouse, which are very explicitly Souls-likes, are less than Hyper Light Drifter or Momodora 4.
Right.
Like I think are worse games, and they're less Souls-like. Like I still think like they're not Lords of the Fallen bad, but it is kind of like this uncanny valley thing where the closer you get to it, the worse it feels.
Yeah.
Without actually being it.
Mm-hmm.
And the value in it, like you said, it's like, the way this reflects on the series, the way this is worthwhile is in how the way this is worthwhile is in how it reflects on the series.
Yeah.
Like this does teach you about why Souls works the way it does.
Yeah.
And the grand lesson of this is like, oh, this is why Souls isn't 2D. Like that causes more problems than it solves. That's really problematic. And then we'll run into the same thing with Dark Mouse.
Yeah.
And Neo has a whole host of other problems, but like Neo is the great hope.
Right.
After this, like everyone just like, man, this is the thing. This is the shit. And like I ended up cooling on that game. Some people still really love it.
Yeah.
But like judging by our Facebook, where I've like kind of been talking about it, responses are pretty like, I'd say like 70-30 balanced towards people who are in my camp.
Yeah.
Who are like, I played that for a while, then got sick of it and moved on.
Yeah.
So there's this like unending hype stream of like what's going to be the next fix for this, and like this has to be good. Like if this isn't like recapturing that magic, like what are we going to do?
What it reminds me of is the MMO hype cycle. Like, okay, I'm playing EverQuest. Well, I hate the makers of EverQuest because they nerfed my class. World of Warcraft is the next great thing. I'm going to play World of Warcraft. Oh, they nerfed my class. So obviously it's going to be the Warhammer medieval game, or it's going to be like any number of these things, or it's going to be Conan. Like there's always this next thing that is kind of built and sold and is the narrative of like, this is going to come in and be the killer, right? Nothing needs to come in and be the killer because From is done with Souls, We don't know what they're going to do next, but it is not going to be explicitly Souls. It could be a Bloodborne move, like we're going to take it and do something like that, and it'll still be very much in the in the vein or in the line. We have no idea to say, but like there's nothing for. I don't think that Salt and Sanctuary or Neo are coming in and saying like we're going to supplant you at this. We're going to draw the audience away. People are hungry for it, right? And people are always going to go back to whatever From puts out. But like that is what it reminds me of, is the MMO kind of churn of like, well, we're going to go away from this and then we're going to retreat back to whatever else is here. We're going to retreat back to WoW once the new expansion comes out.
It's really interesting because like one thing that's kind of when I think about that is like some people are finding each of these things to be everything they want, right? So like there are people who like Salt way more than we do. There are people who like Neo way more than I did. Like I think Jim Sterling likes, this is a 10 out of 10 game.
Right.
Like, I was, whoa.
Wait a minute.
I could not disagree with that more, but like it's, there are people who think that. But for the most people, mostly Souls fans who are just kind of thirsty for this stuff, I can't help but feel like that whole thing is kind of sad. Because like and not everybody thinks this, but I do think there's it's probably like a 60-40 thing. Like a lot of people are pretty disappointed with Dark Souls 3, which was the last real deal. 2, when people are like, From will do something next, like From has a weird, a lot of weird middle period games they could go back to that like nobody was super into.
Right.
Like it's not like they couldn't go back to like Lost Kingdom. Like, oh, we're gonna do the Evergrace. We're gonna do something like that. Like From is not Souls. Right. And when From is not doing Souls, like I have a lot of optimism that it will be cool. I don't know that it will be though.
Right.
And I think that like Souls fandom is so like weird and unique in this thing because it's not just fans of the game, it's us, and it's YouTubers and stuff. And you watch like all these YouTube subscriptions and you watch these guys run out of Souls stuff to do and then just kind of like desperately cast about like maybe I can do a series on the Destiny lore, maybe I can do the series on Horizon Zero Dawn lore and stuff like that, and none of it's sticking. Right. They're not getting numbers, like people aren't interested in it. There's just like it is just a weird little cottage industry that we're totally a part of and party of and everything, but feels like a unique thing in games and a unique problem to be dealing with. Like what happens when these people have kind of based an identity and so much of their self-investment into this franchise that like is going to go away. Like there's an end to every era. Like one way or another, this will go away.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fascinating. Like it's interesting to see. Like I'm, I feel like I'm at peace with it. Like it bums me out. Like I would love there to be like a super great From Souls like to come out after this for them to do it. And I would love to like, when Iter comes out or when we do Hollow Knight or something like that, I would love for it to be good.
Yeah. Like
it'd be and actually scratch that itch. But I think part of the problem eventually is you have to start thinking like maybe the problem is with our expectations.
Oh yeah.
And I'm making us culpable on that, but also the fandom at large.
I mean, we pretty much said like, is there a point where we move away from what from what this thing is or what it wants to become, or what everybody else wants it to be,
And that's a double-sided thing where like I want the fandom to do that, but I also want developers to do it too.
Yeah.
Where it's like this can take the parts of Souls that like you're interested in and make work, but you don't need to make it so slavishly. You don't have to emulate it so faithfully.
Right.
Because again, I just think the closer you get to it, like kind of the the less satisfying it is.
Yeah, it'll stagnate and die. It'll become the age of the deep.
Yeah, we don't need that, man. Like we've got to end the cycle. Like it is, that is the correct ending, and it's never you heard it here first. It's like those like real meta explanations about how Dark Souls 3 is about the Souls like fandom.
Yeah, about taking the Metal Gear Solid 4 kind of approach to it. Yeah.
Like there's something to that, like this idea that like this is about this weird thing that's bigger than all of us. Like
it's bigger than all of us, but it's from all of us.
Yeah. From all of us. It's just interesting. It's an interesting place to be, and like you're curious to see how it works out.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit hard to be super optimistic about.
Yeah.
As much as I can remain interested in. It's like I want to play this Urge.
Yeah.
Like I want to play these other Souls likes. Like I can't. I'm trying to kill the part of me that gets too hyped because that part is poisonous and bad.
Yeah, it's the tension between hype and the desire to plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Gary, I really need to pee. Do you want to either end this, or do you want to take a break and come back and do the outro?
We can end this.
Okay, let's end it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll leave that in so people know what the pressure is as my kidneys burst like Grandpa Simpson.
Please don't.
I will not die.
So we've gone on long enough. Thank you guys very much for writing in. If you have anything to say about Dark Mouse, you still probably have time. Hit us up at duckfeed.tv/contact.
Yes. We're all going to be playing the Ringed City together, not like online or streaming, but we're going to be going through it when you are. We're not getting it early. So if you have thoughts about that, go ahead and send it in there as well. That's logically going to be the next thing we cover. Again, extend us a little bit of patience, a little bit of grace as we figure out what happens between that and say E3.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're figuring it. We're figuring it out. Even if we don't have a plan public, we have some rumblings at the moment of what we would like to do.
Yes, yeah, we have some ideas. You can always support us and get kind of cool stuff if you go to patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv. We greatly appreciate that. It makes a huge deal, a huge difference, and we love it. And the next couple episodes, if this was hard to go through 3-episode arc that was largely negative. I can't promise that any episodes coming up won't be negative, but they won't be as long.
Right.
So except for possibly the Ring City, which I don't know whether that'll be
Who
positive
knows?
or negative yet.
Yeah.
But I promise you that I have an open mind.
Yep.
Other than that, I think that's probably about it. I want Kole to urinate so good.
I'm gonna rock such a piss, man.
Dude, you could blow it away.
Gary, you're killing me. Everything. before we say Umbasa, everything is killing me. So until next time.
Until next time.
May your mice be dark, Umbasa.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon.
Yeah, sweet relief.
All right. Later, man.
All right, bye.
Bye.